Discovering Alabama is a production of the Alabama Museum of Natural History.
America the Beautiful. Forests, rivers, wildlife. A rich heritage of lands, waters, and freedoms that are basic to the very spirit of America. Indeed, the native landscape has long been part of our identity as a nation. But as our nation has grown, in many places the native landscape has all but disappeared, as we see here. This was once a beautiful stream with forested banks and lots of wildlife. Today, the greater part of Birmingham's Village Creek no longer reflects such idyllic scenes. In some places, it's little more than a drainage ditch, lined with our trash and garbage. As modern society expands, cityscapes necessarily replace native landscapes. This has been happening along Village Creek for almost 150 years. But does it have to be this way? I'm Doug Phillips. Join me as we consider this and other questions on a visit to Village Creek. Monument to the mistakes of the past, or an opportunity to learn from these mistakes as we look to the future? This program is about a land unknown to many people, a land that in many ways has escaped the hustle and bustle of modern civilization, a place with bountiful backcountry, forests, streams, and wildlife more diverse than can be found in much of the inhabited world. Come along with me as we explore the natural wonders of this land. Come along as we discover Alabama. Welcome to Discovering Alabama. Today we're going to do something a bit different. Instead of taking you to some wonderful stretch of backcountry, today we've come to inner city Birmingham to examine an Alabama stream whose character is synonymous with modern urban existence, Village Creek. Much of Village Creek is lined or bordered by concrete and surrounded by urban buildup of more concrete and asphalt. Here, it's no longer a creek in the true sense, but instead is an artificial drainage flume. Village Creek, and just a couple of miles away, Valley Creek, are both examples of this kind of expanding urban impact. The very origins of these two streams are not somewhere out in the countryside, but today surrounded by cityscape. The headwaters of Village Creek is a tiny oasis amid the larger bustle of urban life. But almost immediately at its spring-fed origins, the creek runs under a tennis court, and literally and figuratively, it's downhill from there. For about the next 20 miles, this once clean and forested stream has lost all vestige of its wild native character as it flows through the city of Birmingham and several adjoining municipalities.
Village Creek is an urban watershed. It's part of the Warrior system, but in its current configuration starts and ends in metropolitan Birmingham. And this model is, you have to understand, this is a pop art model, so we make no effort here to be exact. Village Creek originates by East Lake. It's fed by the springs at Roebuck Springs, and it flows then past and in fact underneath a portion of the airport, and you can see it here as we have configured it. It goes past and through North Birmingham area, underneath I-65, and then it goes into the Ensley area and beyond over to the Mulga community over by Bayview Lake.
A ways before Village Creek reaches the Black Warrior River, its waters gather behind the dam of Bayview Lake. Upstream from this location, the Village Creek watershed once drained more than 100 square miles of woodlands. Today, it drains the same area, But now a big percentage of this area is concrete and asphalt, streets, parking lots, and storm drainage systems. With the runoff from our urban landscapes, more water flows into Village Creek and into Bayview Lake than ever before. But with the conditions of the watershed today, water's not the only thing that gathers in Bayview Lake. Along with it comes the debris of modern society. At times over the years, Bayview Lake has been more a sea of trash than a lake of water. But does urban growth have to be so total in its impact? What are the ultimate implications for the environment and for the overall quality of our lives? And does such urban extremism perhaps imply a deeper shift in the very character and spirit of who we are as a society? Maybe Village Creek and its history hold some answers. In the mid-1800s, there was no Birmingham. Jones Valley and what would become Birmingham was still an agricultural community with a collection of small villages. Shortly after the Civil War, John Milner, one of the Birmingham area's first industrial developers, described Jones Valley as a place of quiet beauty. One vast garden as far as the eye could reach, with beautiful, clear running streams found gushing everywhere. Village Creek was one of those beautiful, clear-running streams. But Mr. Milner and his fellow industrialists saw Village Creek in another way. They saw it as an important resource for a new urban economy built on coal, iron, and steel.
In most cities that you've seen develop in America, water is always a key element, both in terms of sourcing water for basic needs, but also for industrial purposes. And Birmingham was really gifted in terms of its claim on natural resources, both for waterways that are above surface and subsurface, and also for its mineral wealth. So Village Creek, along with the rest of the watersheds that you find in the area, were probably large determinants for the development, industrial development of Birmingham.
It doesn't look like much now, but around the turn of the century and for decades to come, this site was the showcase of Birmingham's industrial might. This is the site of the Inslee Steel Works, built by the Tennessee Coal and Iron Company, or TCI, later to become part of U.S. Steel. But this industrial growth, this progress, did not come without a price, to Birmingham as a whole and to Village Creek in particular. During the latter part of the 1800s, numerous iron and steel plants were built along parts of Village Creek. They were huge consumers of water, using 25,000 gallons of water for every ton of ore that went into their furnaces. The thirst for industrial water was a major factor in transforming Village Creek, just as the industrial economy was transforming the area's farm and forest setting. By 1910, Tennessee Coal and Iron Company alone was using 400 million gallons of water every day. Industrial reservoirs were built up and down the length of Village Creek. In places, the creek was channelized and diverted for industrial purposes. In 1911, TCI completed work on a dam over 400 feet high, impounding the 530-acre Bayview Lake just to meet the demands for water at its plants in Inslee and Fairfield.
TC&I, Tennessee Coal and Iron, decided they owned all of this property out through this way, evidently. They decided that by damming up Village Creek, and it being a polluted source of water to begin with, because that was the creek that handled all of the wastewater coming out of Birmingham. So they figured they could dam up this polluted water and make a dam and hold the water and then repipe that water to their steel plants to wash their steel. The water wasn't good for anything else, so it was a grand idea. And this lake is responsible for the growth of Birmingham because it has held all of their garbage. All of these years it has received all of their pollution.
As early as the 1880s, John Milner wrote that Village Creek, by reason of the growing population, was fast becoming unfit for a source of water.
With no plan to guide growth in a better way, Village Creek became a victim of growth and degraded to a point that few people in Birmingham look at it as an asset. But what's happening here? Is this a problem only of poor appearance, of poor aesthetics, or do more serious problems prevail?
My experience with doing a little bit of sampling for the bugs, especially in this creek, is that everywhere I've gone, I find a very small number of different species, and usually those are the most pollution-tolerant kinds of species that are able to survive in rivers. You find, in fact, here just a minute ago, we found leeches and damselflies. Damselflies are moderately tolerant, but leeches are the sort of thing that just survive pretty terrible kinds of water conditions. You want to see a nice variety of things when you go look in a stream, and that variety just isn't in any of the spots that I've sampled on Village Creek.
Let's talk for just a moment then about quality of life, because that's what it does. That's what it has done to this community. We have lakefront property that cannot be enjoyed as far as boating. We can't swim in it. We can't fish in it. It's just there.
A creek, if anything, is a source of intrigue for children. And years ago, Village Creek was very important for all local residents. Youngsters came to swim. Churches came to conduct baptisms. And for many families, it was where they caught their dinner.
And the need to maintain the environmental and recreational values of Village Creek was recognized by several Birmingham city leaders almost 70 years ago. They attempted to initiate a plan of action that could have significantly altered the history of Village Creek and perhaps the history of Birmingham itself.
There was an early mayor, George Ward, right at the turn of the century, who felt very strongly that the city should have beautiful aspects to it, and that we were in what was called the City Beautiful movement at that time. And that's when some of the early work in Birmingham parks was done.
One result was a document published in 1925 called the Olmsted Plan, named for the Olmsted brothers. Even today, the name Olmsted remains synonymous with American city planning. The Olmsted Plan recognized that parks and playgrounds are not luxuries, they are absolute necessities. Based on this philosophy, a cornerstone of the Olmsted Plan was the Village Creek Project. This project would have established undeveloped sections of the Village Creek floodplain into an elongated park featuring paths, automobile parkways, and meadows.
The Olmsted Plan was comprehensive. It looked at both existing parks and it looked at major new open space. That included both Village Creek and other waterways. It also included most of the top of Red Mountain, which would have been one of the great urban parks in the country. So it was a really grand vision. Birmingham was not Eden when all this was proposed. It was an industrial city. It had used its waterways primarily for industrial purposes, and as was pointed out in the plans, Village Creek was really a storm drainage system, an open sewer, so to speak.
Needless to say, the Olmsted Plan was not enacted. The city allowed much of the remaining land around the creek to become developed. As urban development packed tighter and tighter, Village Creek gained a reputation that it still holds today, that of a wet weather monster.
If you take a look at Village Creek as it comes through, say in the Ensley area, where the area I'm most familiar with, we're talking a lot of water really fast. When the creek rises, these people have to leave. This is part of the watershed that the Olmsted brothers specifically stated, do not build in this area because it will flood.
It's not just a creek and the channel and the banks of the creek. It's the entire watershed. The watershed is everything that drains into that creek. Because from the top of the ridge line of the mountain, as the water flows, it flows over a large area, eventually ends up the creek, carries a lot with it. We need to be thinking much more comprehensively, broader, looking at that total watershed and the effects of everything that we do that can affect that creek. And if we don't, then in time we lose that creek.
And perhaps the transformation of Village Creek from, well, a true creek to an urban drainage way, perhaps this transformation is about more than pavement, pollution, and flooding problems. Maybe it's part of a bigger story about the transformation of lives, and not of just the physical aspects of how we live, but also of how we feel, think, and value.
Well, there's certainly a connection between our attitudes and our environments, no doubt about it. Our values, attitudes, beliefs, and values are shaped in large part by our environment. My fear is that in urban situations, with the ugliness in a lot of urban situations, that we become almost accustomed to urban blight. It's part of our natural landscape. And so that has a blighting effect on our perceptions of other areas, of natural areas. We're simply not sensitive to it, don't appreciate it, and there's this dampening of the spirit that occurs.
Our society is deteriorating. It truly is. People are so much more greedy than they have ever been because we have so much more now than we've ever had. It's a throwaway society. It's an absolute throwaway society. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Always in a hurry. People are just moving so fast. Everybody is just focusing on their own, on themselves, on their life, not on how their life affects anybody else's life.
Hey, I think it's no wonder that we're seeing this kind of disconnect with the natural environment because urban kids are not in a natural environment. They're in an environment of concrete and asphalt. And if they are outside or if they see the woods is threatening to them. That's not a part of their natural environment. Their natural environment is unnatural. And so I think it's no wonder that we see these attitudes and values that are so strikingly removed from environmental concern.
Of course, across Alabama today, there's still many wonderful wild natural areas. And even in our urban areas, it's often possible to retain the values that nature can provide. One way is to fix the problems of the past. And in fact, that's exactly what's occurring for Village Creek.
Birmingham has recently initiated a master plan to reclaim Village Creek as an amenity for the neighborhoods and citizens of the city, principally recreational, and much along the earlier visions of Village Creek as a linear park and greenway. What we see principally are opportunities to develop lands that were purchased by the Corps of Engineers for relocation around floodplain and floodway concerns. We see the opportunity now to take those lands and develop them for parks, for linear connectors within the city, across various neighborhoods, and as a general embellishment of the city to remind us that we are connected with nature.
The day before Hurricane Opal blew in, we had major flooding along Village Creek. We had major areas, neighborhoods that were damaged. We had millions of dollars worth of damage in the community here. But it could have been worse. The Corps of Engineers project removed 642 homes that would have been damaged or may have been loss of life if we had those 642 homes in place in October. So that's one major improvement in the floodplain.
Before the Clean Water Act, the water quality here was just very bad. And at this point in time, I think especially the toxics side of that equation have improved pretty dramatically. There have been some real dramatic decreases in the amounts of arsenic and heavy metals and some of the things associated with the steel industry. Those discharges have improved dramatically.
The pH measures have improved. So they're in the normal range. The dissolved oxygen, which measures the oxygen content in the water itself, that's, I guess, one of your leading measures that has been going up. And it's not only the some of the programs for stormwater management that we've been looking at, but it's the nature of the creek itself. It's fast flowing, it's shallow, has a limestone base, it's constantly trying to purify itself.
Another way to enhance quality of life in our urban areas is through preventive measures. This is Shades Creek. It's just a few short miles over from Village Creek. And just a ways further in that direction is the Cahaba River.
Both Shades Creek and the Cahaba run through the city limits of Birmingham or one or more of its neighboring municipalities. Yet both streams today retain much of their natural character and much of their forested watersheds. This means important benefits to water quality and wildlife along the stream, and also to human life in nearby communities. But will this be the case into the future?
You have to ask the question today, have we yet learned what's the next Village Creek? Or what's happening in Shelby County? What's happening in other areas of Jefferson County? The planning implications for protecting streamside open space are still as much an issue as they were in 1924, and maybe even more so.
The changes to Village Creek occurred slowly over time as the surrounding area gradually developed, and maybe that's the key concern. Modern growth also occurs bit by bit until we wake up one day and the cumulative effect is wholesale rearrangement of the landscape. Only in today's world, the pace of rearrangement is accelerating. While we can still find areas like Shades Creek and Cahaba here near our urban centers, how much time is left for these natural features, and what will their loss mean for us?
What we've been seeing happen is an accelerated form of urbanization going on in the country. And as you know, the population is growing exponentially. In fact, in our lifetimes alone, it's almost double. And when you're in an urban setting, of course, the milk comes from the grocery store. So we lose our connectivity to the environment. People need close connections with nature, not just an occasional field trip, but an everyday, intimate connection with the natural world.
If you don't protect a stream side from flooding, future flooding, you are really putting a burden on future taxpayers because it's going to cost a lot more to recover it than it is to protect it to begin with.
Now more than ever before, we need to ensure that we have areas, linear parks, passive recreational facilities where we can rest the mind, where we can just rest up from the stress of urban living.
Today, the good news for Village Creek is that Birmingham area leaders are pressing ahead with plans to improve the creek.
This is a second chance of sorts that we have to make Village Creek a primary amenity and link programmatically across Birmingham. We've just had the opening, the first of the neighborhood-based parks along the linear park, W.C. Patton Park. So we're seeing real manifestations of the plan. The linear park aspect would be a great opportunity for exercise and recreation, for walking, for jogging, for bicycling, for exploring, generally getting a feel for what this city rests on. That we are, again, in the context of nature. We feel that this will be one of the most beneficial programs in terms of open space and green space development that we've seen in the city in our recent history.
Efforts are underway to really try and not just temporarily dress it up, but to look at a long-term way of improving the quality of the watershed. And now here's an opportunity to create parkways, bicycle paths, but beyond that, to try and find a balance between our needs and that of nature.
We just need to realize that if you use it well, use the natural resources well, they really do create a value, long-term value that keeps on creating value for neighborhoods and for cities. That's the lesson I think with Village Creek. If it had been done, it would have created value that lasted over the years. If it's done now, it will help recover value.
A friend of mine is fond of saying that some folks know the price of everything and the value of nothing. My friend feels that some who use our free enterprise system are fixated on simply making the quick buck at the expense of other important values. And it may be that controlling development in order to protect such qualities and values as these will sometimes interfere with the chance to make a quick buck. But in our free enterprise system, we have an extra responsibility to nurture all values that are basic to this land of America the Beautiful, including those values associated with our natural heritage.
That's an option that a free society can exercise. The alternative is a picture not out of some futuristic movie. It's already here to see firsthand. The choice is up to us. Thanks for joining us on our visit to Village Creek. Please send any comments to the following address.
This program is supported by grants from Legacy, Partners in Environmental Education, and the Alabama Wildlife Federation, working for wildlife since 1935.